Hoping that you guys can see and hear me. I still haven't got everything sorted out or dialed in, but day two, which is the second time I'm recording today, technically, though yesterday I started at 11:59, so you know. Anyway, welcome to another stream. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm going through the Bible chronologically and sort of just sharing my thoughts. But I wanted to give a slight update. So my U version, um, it's not syncing across. So in as much as I listened and marked it in the app, when I log on here, and I'll share my screen in a second, it's not translating. And since I do a lot of the study itself in the Blue Letter Bible, I've just switched to that. I will try and keep the U version updated because I think that's more common, and if anyone's following, it's easier to follow. So I'll keep that up to date, but I'm switching pretty much exclusively to the Blue Letter Bible for a number of reasons, which I'll show you right now. So, um, just showing the entire screen because why not? So in here, there's some really cool tools. So you've got your today's reading, and this is tomorrow's reading because I've read today's Gashel. So I am 0.59% through. This was the daily reading for today. And the next reading, which is tomorrow, is Genesis 8 to 11. One thing I found is when you actually go to read, so I'm just going to start this, I'm not actually going to read it. You've got these options, but you can also listen. And when you click to listen, you get this little pop-up, which I found super useful, which literally is a player, and you can change the version. And you've got your navigation here. You can increase the speed, you can repeat or make it continuous. I left it continuous, which is why I'm on chapter 8. It's like reading through again. And yeah, I found this is super useful, super cool. But yeah, so gone here. Hey, Happy New Year, Addy. Shout out. So I wanted to also show you guys just something. I'll come to today's reading. So today's reading, we looked at if I just quickly jump in. So today was 4 till 7. Adam and Eve, yeah, so Cain and Abel, a few things. But actually, before I get into that, I'm all over the place again because my son's up and my wife's holding him, but I want to go and relieve her in a second. Yesterday, I mentioned how the Big Bang is of odd mythologies, creation mythologies that I have come across. The Big Bang is the most loosely aligned with the biblical creation story. Now, I don't say that to make too much of a point of it, but I did, and this is me using AI again, so this is me using Claude. I did create like a comparison between the order and the current understanding of the Big Bang. When I say loosely, I mean loosely. You do have to almost, set aside the time variation. The Big Bang suggests millions and billions of years. The Bible suggests a fixed period of 6 days. And where there are arguments about the days being errors, maybe, the fact that those days are directly compared to the Sabbath that men are supposed to take almost suggests it couldn't be errors. Ade is quite good with numbers and can extrapolate how maybe time itself is moving differently. But anyway, all that aside, those you kind of have to put aside just to see from a top level. And I say from a top level because science, I believe, is catching up with what God has done. That is correct me, yeah, relativity. Yeah. So I think science is revealing what God has done. We are observing and learning about what God has done with science. And so I actually think science will eventually, if God, if God permits us to get that far, get to a point where it's just confirming what God has said, if we're honest about it. But things like, as I said yesterday, there was nothing and God spoke, let there be lights, of which there's this explosion. That's the general beginning of the Big Bang as well. There's nothing, and then it exploded. I think it's Joe Rogan said an atheist asked for just one miracle, which is that nothing can produce something, whereas we claim God can do all miracles. But anyway, stuff like the waters being the first environment that allows for animals to be created, fish, and we have that, marine life. So it shows the Genesis account, it shows the Big Bang or modern science timeline and points of convergence. Both begin with light appearing early, a separation of or organization of matter, in day two, land and water being separate, plant life emerging, the distinct nature of celestial bodies. Whereas, again, with other mythologies, the celestial bodies themselves are part of the whole, all of that jazz. But I just found this interesting. And again, it's not to say that it's proof of anything. There are some major differences, some significant differences as well, but differences that I'm not going to get into right here. Yeah. So I thought this was really cool. Wanted to show this to you. In today's topic, today's reading, um, first thing that came to mind as I was going through it was this exclamation that Eve makes when she conceives Cain. It's interesting because it almost suggests to me, and we've got to take into consideration we don't have a good idea of how long this has been since they were cast out, and then Eve has had Cain. But one thing we do recognize from the Bible, and you recognize as you read, is that it doesn't necessarily record everything. It records what's important for the purpose of the Bible. And as we go through, eventually we'll get there. But where it mentions Cain and Abel as the first and then the second son, we will go on in chapter 5. Is it chapter 5? Yes, where we have a bit of a genealogy. It just mentions the important ones. So Cain and Abel were part of the story. Cain was the first son. But when we account for the genealogy, it focuses on the most important ones. Adam begot Seth, who was the third son, but he was important to the timeline, if that makes sense. And so going back, the way that Eve, says, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Maybe this is me. This it is conjecture, not even maybe. But it almost seems as though she's been waiting for a man. Has she had other children? Is there something about Cain that makes him stand out? That means he's significant. Could there have been other sons? Um, and over what time period? We don't know. But this is important because it almost hints at, or at least in my mind, and why I'm going down this rabbit hole, it hints at maybe there being other children, siblings, human beings born from Adam and Eve, maybe, that Cain could have taken his wife from. Because later on, we realize he moves away after he kills his brother, and he goes and takes a wife, and he has his own lines. Where did his wife and children, where did his wife come from? Um, and there are loads of studies on this, and people that give much better explanations. But just as I'm going through it quickly, and I'm still sort of getting everything set up, so I'm not getting too deep into things. I think there is room there, for maybe somewhat of an explanation as to where Cain might have got his wife from. Another thing I wanted to point out is um, God's response to Cain. So typically, we tend to think of Old Testament God, not we. I guess a major misconception, I would say, of God is that there seems to be some sort of difference between God of the Old Testament and God of the New Testament, where God of the Old Testament is, do good, do bad, get bad. Whereas God of the New Testament is chill and, it's all good, you're forgiven. But when Cain commits the first murder and is punished by God, his response, is that, let's just read it, Uh, so God says, where is Abel and the famous among my brother's keeper? God says, what have you done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. Let me switch to NLT. We're in chapter, sorry, we're in chapter 4. Yeah. What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed and banished from the ground, which has swallowed your brother's blood. No longer will the good ground yield crops for you, no matter how hard it work. You'll be a homeless wanderer on the earth. Cain replied, my punishment is too great for me to bear. You banished me from the land, and you've made me a homeless wanderer, and when they find me, will kill me. No, for I will punish sevenfold anyone who kills you. And the Lord puts a mark on Cain to warn anyone. This stood out to me again because this is almost atypical of the God that misconception presents, where it's just punish, punish, punish. In as much as Cain has just killed someone, even for the first time, God tempers his punishment when Cain exclaims or laments that it's too much with protection. And we've seen this before when Adam and Eve sinned, they were cast out. I didn't even mention this yesterday, but they were cast out because they were now in a place of sin. And it seemed God was concerned with them not eating of the fruit of life and remaining in that sin eternally. Thus, he cast them out. And even on casting them out, where they had created clothes of leaves, which would have done little to help against the elements, God gave them clothes of animal skins, which we know would be much more durable, um, and hints at the shedding of innocent blood to cover sin. But we'll get there. And I should have mentioned that yesterday as well. But anyway, we see God tempering his justice with mercy again here. Um, and that easily gets missed, I think, sometimes. The next thing, the last thing I want to talk on this, because I want to get back to helping out with my son, is this lovely thing that I found. I didn't find this. I read. I was listening to a teacher who's since passed called Chuck Missler, and is going to be chuckling at that. And he pointed this out. But in this genealogy, we get from Adam to Seth to Enosh to Kenan. It just lists out their names. Um, and what Chuck Winston did was do a brief um, a brief sort of translation of the name. I'm going to switch back to KJV for that. Um, but you look at Adam and Adam, and this is useful with the Blue Letter Bible. And there are apps I should mention. There are apps like Logos and Olive Tree. I am a user of Olive Tree as well. I'll just show you that super briefly. This is Olive Tree. It's really nice, and you get all of these things. They present this functionality as well, but yeah, Blue Letter does it for free. Um, Adam means so it's translated here. Strong gives it the name of the first man. It means red, but also means man. Um, and then if I go back, um, Adam gave birth to Seth, and Seth, the word, and again, it's not as easy to translate some of these. So what Chuck Missler was doing was not just translating them directly, like here with compensation, but actually going into sort of the etymology of the word. Where did it come from? You know, and Seth comes from a word that means to set, to impose something, right? So let's go back to that, and I won't go through all of them. I'm just giving you a sense of this. So, Adam, man, Seth, impose, to set something, Enos, um, son of Seth, as a translation, isn't as helpful, but it comes from a word that then also means man, mortal, you know. So Chuck Mister does this for all of the names in the etymology, sorry, in the genealogy, and I've got that here. Um, and this is in Genesis chapter 5, right? Mind you. So it's worth remembering this is all the way in Genesis. It'll be hard to sort of contrive this, being the point. Adam gives birth to Seth, who gives birth to Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. And again, not translating the names directly because names are just that, names, and sometimes can be hard, but going into etymology to find the root word of some of these names and bringing those meanings to the surface. And he gets this interesting message: man appointed, set, mortal sorrow. Blessed God, descend to dedicate that his life will bring the sorrowful rest. Um, I mean, if that's not obvious, that's clearly a prophecy of Jesus Christ. If I'm to put this into a sentence, man is appointed, man is set, mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall descend and dedicate, and by his death, he will bring the sorrowful rest. If that's exactly what Jesus did, the blessed God descending, that his death brings us rest. And you know this isn't as contrived because Enoch, who was, he's described as walking with God so closely that he's just taken away. His son has a prophecy attached to him that his death shall bring something. And Methuselah, those words literally mean his death shall bring. So there's a prophecy with his son that his death shall bring. Um, Now his life ends the same year as the flood begins. So that in their context, his death brought the flood, which was significant and would make sense for his prophecy. But his son and then his grandson, Lamech and Noah, Noah being the one that survives the flood, having these names again suggests, it's hard to contrive this, especially with people that would have, this would have been oral history that they knew of, that they passed down. This isn't something later on someone changed. This would be what they would add. This Torah, especially these first five books, are the same in the Hebrew Bible, which is hundreds and hundreds, thousands years old. So I love that whenever I see it, it reminds me, the ministry of Christ was no accident. It was very much a planned, intervention from jump. You know, that an animal was killed in the garden to cover Adam and Eve. From jump points to the killing of an innocent to cover sin. Christ was that innocent whose death washes away our sin. And so, cool. With that, I'll round up today's daily. These will get a bit better, I promise, a bit more structured, a bit less chaotic. But hopefully, you're encouraged to do some studying of your own. Spending however long, every single day in the Word, I think makes sense. We eat every day. Um, we drink every day. There are things that we do every day uh, that we consider and that nature suggests are necessary for our existence. Well, it could fast, but there are things that we do every day. We sleep every day that we know are useful for our continued existence. Um, Taking in the word of God, I think, is just as important. Our spiritual health, our um, feeding on His word is equally as important as sleep, as rest, as food. So I hope these give you some time to think about jumping into the word yourself and see what you can gain from it. There's loads of tools, and I'm hoping these will expose you to some of them as well that make that easier. Um, but yeah, cool. I will be signing out. Thank you for watching whenever you do, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.